Just a couple words before we get started and take any questions for today. One, we appreciate everybody joining us this afternoon. And also, obviously, this is our 13th season of Thunder basketball. I always think it's important at the beginning of the season to acknowledge that, given that we're still such a young franchise with respect to the league that we are 1/30th of. I think it's fair to say that coming into this season, given everything that's going on in the country relative to COVID, the effects that's having on everybody, both locally and nationally, this is going to be a pretty unique season for everybody in the NBA, just given the uncertainties and all the different precautions that we have to take in order to put everybody's health and safety first and foremost. Along with that, obviously our announcement today that we're going to be delaying having fans into our arena until further notice is another acknowledgement, in our opinion, of the standing that the organization and the role the organization has to play within the community. Obviously, we've said this for years, but the Thunder stands for much more than what it is we do. Our relationships within the community, the role we play in attempting to be an ambassador for the state, both nationally and internationally, bringing people together. And of course, really close to our heart is our relationship with our city and our state and the people that support the team or just live in the community in which the team resides. And putting their health and safety first is paramount. So I'm really proud of our franchise to be a part of that and a part of that organization that put the interests of the people first, and we're going to continue to do that as we move forward. The other thing I just want to add before we head into this season, obviously, is we're obviously really excited about the mix of players that we have heading into the year, both the older players that we've brought in, and obviously some of the younger players that we've added, as well as a group of returning younger players whom we want to continue to see evolve and grow, both from a developmental standpoint, but also within the roles that they play and the expansion of those roles and opportunities. So that's going to be, I think, a really good thing for our organization. We've always prided ourselves on being a place where people and players improve and get better. And this is another opportunity for us to kind of embrace that identity and throw that forward. Lastly, thing I want to touch on is, the job that Mark has done in just a few weeks here has been exceptional. I think it's extraordinarily promising for the organization and the team. Just the way he has empowered different people in the building, brought people together, has just shown a tremendous curiosity for how to take in information and be extraordinarily forward thinking. I think he's going to do an excellent job, both relationally with our guys and our players, but also kind of working to tap into the different resources and people, in the support staff area that are player facing staff members. And I think that's an indication of the type of person he is, but also his understanding of the priorities of our organization, the culture of our organization. We're certainly not perfect in a lot of ways, but one thing we do believe in is collaboration and teamwork and making people feel a purpose coming in every day. And I think the way he approaches the job is going to put people closer to that vision that we have. So with that, I'm happy to answer any and all questions that you guys have. Again, just noting that there might be a few things that are outstanding that I can't speak to specifically from a trade standpoint, but I'll be happy to do my best any way I can.
Thank you, Sam. Let's kick things off with Joe Masato at the Oklahoman. Joe, go ahead and unmute your line and ask away.
Hey, Sam. How's it going?
Good, Joe. How are you?
Doing okay. Given the condensed calendar and the speed of which everything has moved in the last couple of weeks, I know this is sort of a broad question, but starting when the trade moratorium was lifted a couple of weeks ago, were you surprised or did you anticipate the pace in which everything would move and how quickly some of these deals would come together?
That's a good question, Joe. I think the one thing that we've learned about this entire period of time, starting on March 11th, is it is a totally unique experience. So there isn't a lot of history that you can really like lean on. We really didn't know. I mean, we didn't have a feel for that. Kind of what the pace of the decision making would be, if that would speed things up, or it could have. There's an argument that you could have made prior to the moratorium being lifted that things could have been really, really slowed down. So I think one thing that we've tried to do over the course of time that we've been in Oklahoma City is try to be adaptable and prepared for the different circumstances that can that can present themselves. So we tried to do that in this case, but we didn't anticipate. I guess we weren't expecting one thing or the other. We were just trying to kind of stay it's kind of in the moment to see what direction it ultimately went. And obviously it went toward probably more activity than less. I also think there's a lot to learn there relative to just going into this season as well, with all of the protocols and procedures and the stops and starts that we can probably anticipate. We've never been through a season like this before. No team has. The bubble is not comparable, whatsoever. We were fortunate to as a league to have to finish a season in the bubble, which is a completely different exercise than beginning a season like the NFL or Major League Baseball has had to do. So we have the benefit of watching them. But I don't know that the bubble experience is going to be a great, tremendous learning for us, other than we know, the effects of testing and that it can work if you really have a tremendous infrastructure like that. But I don't think that's going to be replicable in 30 different markets. So a lot to learn. I think, lessons from the pandemic are to, one, you've got to stick with things. You can't expect them to be perfect. You should expect them to be imperfect, and control the way you want to react to those when things aren't the way you want them to be. And I think be optimistic and be grateful. Like we're very fortunate, to have a good perspective on the world, and the fact that the health and safety of people is much more important than any sport or any game. And that, as a country, like we're going to get through this, but we're not through it yet. And by all accounts, it's probably going to get more challenging. And as a sports league and as an organization, we're just going to have to roll with that, do the best we can, but not lose sight of the bigger picture here.
That first week, when the trade moratorium lifted, the draft is on Wednesday, free agency starts Friday. Is that like the busiest week you can remember as a GM? I'm just wondering how much sleep you're getting, how much you're on the phone, just stuff like that.
I don't honestly. I'm not so sure. I think you learn a lot through every. I know for me personally, I'm always learning every year that I have the privilege of doing this job. So I don't know. I mean, I think things come in different sequences. Obviously, it was busy, but as I've said many times, like I'm the beneficiary of so many talented people that I have the privilege of working with and have worked with over the course of time here. It's certainly not like me here by myself. We have a great team of people that are extraordinarily talented, and I rely on them heavily. And it really is a team effort. And it's certainly not possible to work through all the different challenges and balls in the air that we have to juggle without a really deep roster of people in the building as a whole. I mean, just to get the building up and running in this environment, our medical staff and our logistics team and our building operations team, they have to work like a basketball team on the court. It's a team within a team. We've always looked at the Thunder in that way, that, there's a team, but there's also a team of people within the building that have to operate with the same principles and values that we would hope to see on the court. And those have been on display since March 11th, and they're going to have to continue to be called on going forward. But as far as your question, I don't know if it was the busiest point in time or not. But certainly had a lot to juggle.
Eric Horn with The Athletic.
Hey, Sam, can you hear me?
Yep. Excellent. Yep.
Okay. I wanted to get, a little information from you in terms of, what went into the decision to trade Steven Adams, based on where y'all are, and, what was Steven's reaction to the trade?
Well, I guess first and foremost, I mean, that was a really, really challenging and difficult decision for us to make. I think the number one thing for us is to recognize, and in these situations, we have to put the best interest of the organization first. That doesn't make the decision easier by any stretch. But one of the things that I do feel we were able to do, even though it was a very hard decision to make, was recognizing that with where we're transitioning to as an organization after 13 years, or excuse me, after 12 years of high performance, we'd be in a little bit of denial to think that we at some point after that amount of time, especially after the summer of 2016, we wouldn't have to transition our team purely based on the fact that we have high goals and high aspirations to, one day have another long run of high performance over consecutive years. Transitioning the team at some point is going to be a necessity unless we were to lower our expectations and our goals, which, would require different methodology. And making these types of decisions is part of that process. One thing I do feel good about is that, given where Steven was going to be at the end of the year as an unrestricted free agent, the unlikely, hood that we would be committing, or be able to commit to that type of to what his market is, finding a situation where if we couldn't do that for him, finding a situation where he would be in a really good playing situation, which I believe he is, with a great organization in New Orleans, and also in a place that he would be able to get that type of security. So the fact that it was done as an extended trade, I think is reflective of all the parties working together to find a solution that made sense for him, made sense for us, and obviously made sense for the Pelicans. The second part of your question, I talked with Steven, prior to the trade taking place. We talked for a little while, and I extended my gratitude to him for everything that he's done for the organization. I've had open discussions with his agent about this potential reality, and have been very transparent about his role in the organization, how important he is. He's left a tremendous mark on our franchise, and we're extremely grateful. At the same time, we also have to do what we feel is in the best interest of the long term for our organization, after the 12 years that we've been performing at an elite level. And in order to meet those aspirations, you're going to encounter really tough decisions, and we've done that in the past. I think there's a lot of ways to talk yourself into and shy away from those types of decisions. But ultimately, we have to put the Thunder first. And it wasn't my best day at work, I can tell you that. But I feel passionate about relentlessly pursuing a bright future for this organization. And if you're comfortable during that period of time, then I don't know that you're doing anything that's going to lead you to be different.
Sam, just in terms of free agency, I don't know how much you can expound on this, but where are y'all in terms of talking to Andre and him potentially coming back to the team?
Sure. Well, I mean, obviously, Dre is somebody that we have a tremendous amount of respect for. Right now, with our roster situation, we have to sort through a tremendous amount of other decisions before we can get to adding any other players. But I've been in touch with his representation and keeping tabs on that. right now we're pretty full. But there'll be, and we're gonna have to make some decisions coming up here as we sort through that. But everybody knows how we feel about him, and we continue to maintain contact with his reps.
Next up, Royce Young, ESPN.
Hey, Sam. I kind of want to ask you, piggybacking a little bit off of what Eric asked. When you look at your roster, you don't really have any long tenured Thunder players anymore. I know culture and core values are so important to the organization. And so my question kind of is, like, without those links to the past anymore, if Andre doesn't return, now you don't have Steven. How do you kind of maintain the culture that you guys established with those links to the past, going back to the first couple seasons that extended into Steven, from Nick Carlson to Steven, and now you just kind of don't have anybody? I don't know if that question makes sense, but how do you maintain that culture within the players that you've had for so long?
Well, I think it's a great question. I think, as like anything else, like any environment or culture is constantly evolving, and you're not going to, you're not. I don't think like you're trying to recreate anything. I think, especially for us, the period of time you're referring to, from like the 2008 season, through, I don't know, really just recently, that was a very unique period of time. So I think, rather than holding on to that and fearing that you're losing something, it's changing all the time, no matter what. And what you do is, I think you look to the past for inspiration, but you're certainly having to create something new going forward. I think that's kind of the exciting thing about sports in general, is that it's always evolving. I do think that the people you referred to have changed over 12 years. But I think that we always talk about leaving a legacy. And I think that, like, those players have left a tremendous legacy here. And they have left behind a certain set of standards that we're going to certainly try to work by. But we're not trying to recreate something, because, 2008 was a really long time ago. In today's day and age, with where we are now, 2018 seems like a really long time ago. And so I think it's having a set of values, having a vision for the organization, one that we really do believe we're trying to build a legacy in real time for our organization, a very young organization at that. Second, like, we are relentlessly trying to improve and pursue progress each and every day in every way that we come to the office or take the floor. And then, how do we create the optimal conditions where people get better, both players and staff, and everyone together as a larger whole. From there, I think that's, the individuals have to come together, be themselves, and carry that forward. But we're not trying to replicate anything. We needed to breathe, and I think players like Shea and players like Lou and Bays and these younger guys, they've been here, they've been in the building, and we're putting a lot of faith in them and a lot of responsibility on them to recognize that there's a legacy of a way you show up every day. Not necessarily, we averaged 50 plus wins a year or so, winning percentage over the last 10 years. It's probably unlikely that we're going to do that for the next 10 years. I don't think that's been done before. But I do think the way we show up to work every day, the professionalism in which we treat one another, and the respect we show to people, the way we conduct ourselves in the community, the fact that we, in this particular city, want to stand for more than what we do, I think those are expectations that we can continue to work with going forward.
Next up, Andrew Schleck with The Athletic and Down to Dunk podcast.
Hey, Sam. I was curious about how you selected Poku. And obviously you identified him. You valued him quite a bit in trading Ricky Rubio and 2 picks to get up there to get him. I'm just curious about the scouting process for him versus other players. He played in kind of a lower league over in Europe, and I'm just curious, like, how did you identify him as the guy that you wanted in the draft, and then kind of what do you see for him this year?
Sure. Well, again, I mean, we have to give credit to our scouting group, our evaluating group, led by Will Dawkins. Poe Kusevsky was a player last summer. I'm getting all the time mixed up, but I think it was last summer. Yeah, we were on a normal schedule at that point. Sometime in, I guess, July or August, probably, playing in some, I think it may have been under 18 tournament. We scout those things ferociously. The FIBA events, I may have mentioned this in the last press avail I did. Those are such great events to be at. And he was a player that caught the attention of the group, just based on his mobility and his basketball IQ, feel for the game, overall skill level. And we tracked him, from that point on, and tried to stay as connected as we could to all the international players. But to him, I was able to get over to see him play in, I think it was October. I actually saw him in Maladon on the same trip, as a matter of fact. And there were plenty of other NBA people, at those games as well. It wasn't like we were there by ourselves or anything like that. And I just think that, our evaluators felt like he's, a pretty unique player, just on the mere fact that he's the youngest player in the draft and has a rare combination of attributes. Now, does that mean he's going to equate into being a very good NBA player, or even an effective NBA player? We don't know the answer to that. But again, we took Darius Baisley and we moved back to get him the last draft prior. I think we moved back 3 spots to get him. We moved up to get Pokusevsky. All of that's kind of irrelevant. It all comes down. And when you ask me about Baisley or whoever did, I said, I don't know. We're doing the best we can. We don't have the answers. We're just trying to shift the odds a little bit to see if we can find somebody, in that range of the draft. And you guys have got 12 years of covering an NBA team now, so the odds of picking in the 20s or picking, in the 10 to 20 range, and just trying to find an NBA player that can be in the league for more than 3 or 4 years. And I wouldn't have predicted Baisley would have been on this path. Same thing about Sabonis. I think everyone asked about Sabonis and or Ferg when we had Ferg. I didn't know that he'd be playing right away. I don't know what the future is for Pokusevsky. I think a lot of that depends on Pokusevsky and how hard he's willing to work, how much he's willing to buy into the plan for him. I have no reason to think he won't. But, working with Mark and his coaching staff, and you just can't skip steps in development. I mean, there's just no way around it. And you're going to need some opportunity. And the reason why the opportunity, I think, is important is because opportunity is where you learn, like, where your deficiencies are, where your limitations are, and where you experience failure. Because failure is literally the engine to improvement. If you don't get a chance to fail, if you don't get a chance to get feedback as to what's not working, it's really, really hard to get better. And that's why I think some of the players that we've had here over the last 12 years that have really grown, irrespective of their age, so to speak, but just in general, players that have improved here, have done so through really challenging circumstances and through a lot of rough nights or rough outings. And the one thing they have in common is they have resiliency, and they have the ability to take in the information that they're not getting it done in the moment, but understand that the work they're doing is going to benefit them in the long run. I actually think that was something I learned really quickly. I think Kevin Durant, for me as a young general manager in 2007, I've never seen anybody that understood the process of improving more so than him. He was probably 19, and his mindset was that of like a 50-year-old person. And it really opened my eyes that it doesn't matter really your age. If you have a growth mindset and you really understand the benefits of putting in the time and the process of improving versus just immediate gratification, you can really gain a huge advantage on the field. And I don't know if Poku has that. We're going to find that out. And I think with a lot of our players, for that matter, I think with Shea, I mean, we're really kind of clearing the way for him to expand his game, to be on the ball full time. We're putting a lot of faith in him, and really kind of showing him that, like, you know, he's a central figure to a lot of the things that we ultimately want to be. But that's not going to be linear. And a lot of the other guys that have been in a situation like him, you know, over the course of time, have done so through adversity. And that's how you know how good they are. They bounce through things. Their talent shines through difficult times. You know, they experience, you know, even being overwhelmed at different points in time, but they bounce back from that because they have a competitiveness that allows their talent to maybe move up a notch beyond what it is naturally. And with Pokusevski, he's going to have to prove that he has that. He's got a lot of physical tools, but there's going to be a lot more to it than that.
Yeah. One follow-up. Do you know how difficult it's been for him? I mean, it's not even been 2 weeks since he was drafted, and he is all of a sudden being thrust into training camp. Like, do you know how difficult that transition has been for him thus far?
Well, considering that I've never been an NBA player or even been confused with one, I really can't say how difficult it is. I can go off my experience of being around players. What I will say is I think for every rookie in this league this season, it's not going to be a normal year. Generally, let's just think about for a second what we're really missing here. Number one, the guys haven't played 5-on-5. I'm talking about all the guys in the draft. Haven't played 5-on-5 since, you know, like March or whatever. Because going through the draft process, one of the big things that people are trying to avoid is getting injured. So a lot of it's one-on-one workouts and one-on-0 workouts, et cetera, et cetera. Then when you get drafted, you generally have a summer league, and you have a whole summer of development, one-on-one work. You learn terminology. You're in an NBA environment. In the case of Pokusevski and Teo, you know, those guys, they are also going through a massive transition just culturally. Like, you cannot underestimate that either. And you're losing summer league, you're losing training camp, you're losing that month of September which is generally like a kind of open gym format. For us, that's been a big factor. Like, again, back to Royce's question, we have a lot of standards and things that people have laid the groundwork for 10 years, whether it was Kevin or Russell or James or Serge, or those guys lived in the gym here. And the bedrock, and Nick, and you know, when you bring in a Steven Adams or a Sabonis or a whomever those other guys are, Reggie Jackson, there was a level of expectation that September or most of the summer you're going to be in Oklahoma City sweating it out. Sometimes in the over by the dog food, you know, in the Blue Building, or you know, in the Ion here. Those guys haven't got the benefit of that. I'm talking about Poku. And then you're going right into a training camp. I think it's going to be a rough transition for a lot of young players. There's no question about it. But that's for everybody. So I think there will be a transition for all the international guys, especially just culturally. There always is. And then from a basketball standpoint, all the first-year players are going to be without the benefit of any summer league or one-on-one time. And one thing for us also is just, I mean, we like to kind of get to know the players personally, what they're about, where they're from on a personal level. I know this is one of Mark's, I think, greatest strengths as well, is like we see the player as a person first. And so there's relationship building that needs to take place too. And that we haven't really had the opportunity to do that as well. So this is just the times we're in, and then we're going to have to make the most of the situation. That's why the mindset of the player, the tradition and expectations internally of the work capacity that's expected, but also the mentality of a growth mindset and a commitment to development. Those things are going to be even more important.
Next up, Cliff Brunt with the Associated Press. Go ahead, Cliff.
Yeah. Just want to know, how critical is it that the young guys who are holdovers, primarily Shea and Darius Baisley and Lou Dort, had that playoff experience last season, and how do you see that playing into what you're trying to build going forward?
Well, I think with any young player, I think any experience is critical. I mean, you're really not going to find like a lot of history is not going to show a lot of players that have gone on to become effective NBA players at a high level that that don't get to play or don't get opportunity, even if it's small. It leads into bigger opportunity. I mean, shoot, we saw Serge Ibaka get 2 minutes in Detroit. I think maybe the third or fourth game of the season. He turned that 2 minutes into 10 minutes, into 12 minutes. And next thing you know, he's blocking 8 shots in a first-round playoff series against the Lakers. But if he doesn't get those 2 minutes, then it never happens. I think Lou is another great example. I wish we could take, a lot of credit for knowing that Lou Dort was going to be a guy that was going to be starting at the end of the season. But Lou Dort, he's playing because we had some injuries and we didn't have anybody really to play in that position without really, jumbling up the rotation. And we're playing Utah and Portland, and he got thrown out there and, didn't fail. And next thing you know, he's Lou Dort. So these things come down to opportunity. They come down to preparation. I do think it comes down to creativity and thinking outside the box, recognizing that you have to invest in the short term to get the benefits long term. And sometimes you stumble onto a few things too and get lucky, probably more often than not. Like that's where a lot of things happen in the NBA is mostly good fortune and things falling your way. But the playoff experience in the bubble, I don't even know if I would call that playoff experience, to be honest with you, Cliff, because there's no crowd. There's no travel. It's just a very unique experience. I don't know if we'll ever be back in that again, but I would tell you that it has great value, but it's not like true playoff experience because there just wasn't the atmosphere and the environment that we generally know to be the playoffs. Now, still is extremely competitive, and the best teams advanced and the best teams won by all means, but it was a little bit different. The one thing I do think that all three of those guys have benefited from is those guys were forced into different situations. I mean, Bays was starting because Gallinari didn't play some back-to-backs, and like just kind of sometimes like being over your head a little bit, like that can, as I said before, really kind of like pull like or expose like your resiliency factor and your optimism and your humility and what's kind of driving you day in and day out. And I had dinner with Bays down in the bubble a couple of different times, and like I just loved his mentality because he was just learning and just taking every game, good or bad, and throwing it into his experience and realizing that it's all a path for him to figure out how good a player he's ultimately going to be. I think he's got a great mind for that. I think Diallo's got a great mind for that too. I think I may have said this before, but Diallo is a guy that he's come into every camp and carved out a role on a team. I mean, he was starting on a team due to some injuries, but he was in the rotation with PG and Russell and Carmelo and that team. The following year, when that team turned into Dennis and Jeremy and Steven and Russell and PG, he was in the rotation there, and he lost his spots due to injuries, and then got down to the bubble during the training camp, and he won a spot in that rotation. And then we shortened the rotation in the playoffs, and he lost a spot there. But like he's gonna be ready to go. Like he's another guy that'll be ready to go. So I think all those guys have been pushed to limits in which they're uncomfortable, and they've shown the ability to bounce back from setbacks. That's a big part of our organization, and it's the reason I think we've had success with some younger players over time. And the resilience that they've shown, but I also think as an organization, we've prided ourselves on being resilient and looking at some of the things that have happened over the course of time, whether they're injuries or players leaving or, some tough luck with the CBA and said, okay, we have to respond to this. How are we going to respond? It's all about what we can control from here. And I think that is the mindset we want to hold. I think we have to have that. I also think that's very, very much what runs through the blood of people in Oklahoma. And we want to represent that. Resiliency, commitment. Look, we're happy being David to Goliath. We want to own that. That's what we're built on. We're not looking for half measures around here. We want to strive to see if we can be great. And we're willing to take the paths that require extreme competitiveness to do that.
Next up, we're going to go to Jenny Carlson with the Oklahoman. Go ahead, Jenny.
Hey, Sam, how are you?
Good. How are you? I wish I could see everybody. This is like really, it's very strange.
Well, this way we can stay in pajamas, so it's probably for the best. Hey, Cliff was asking about that young core of guys that you've got coming back, and you could tell that those guys enjoyed being teammates with Chris and Dennis and Steven and guys that are no longer Thunders. I'm curious sort of what your conversations have been with them about now being those guys. I mean, they've essentially transitioned into those roles. What have you heard from them just about sort of how that's all come to be at this point?
Well, I think one thing as a young player, working to establish yourself in the NBA, a first, second, third, fourth year player, whatever that might be. And we have a lot of experience with those guys over time. They're hungry for opportunity. They're hungry for responsibility. They're hungry to develop and expand their games. They're hungry to lead and learn to lead. And as much as I think those guys, are rightfully so, are going to miss those players. We all are. I mean, I loved working with Chris Paul. I learned so much from that experience. Gallo as well. Change is part of this industry. If you're not changing, you're standing still. And as I said earlier, after 12 years, transitioning is to think that we're going to be above that or beyond that is probably a little bit ignorant. And so we know that eventually is going to happen. We obviously wanted to get in front of that the way we did things this off season. But what that does is it opens up a ton of opportunity and responsibility for a group of guys that have an unbelievable opportunity in front of them. It's not going to be easy because a lot is going to be expected of them, but clearly we're giving them the opportunity to expand their games and to establish themselves in a very, very difficult league. So I hope they recognize that we're putting, we're putting some faith in them, both on and off the court. And there's a lot of responsibility that comes with that. But as a young player, I think you want that. I think you want that challenge. And I think you want the opportunity to prove yourself. And they're going to get that opportunity.
You mentioned earlier how rough a road this year is likely to be for rookies because of all the things that have come with the COVID off season. So it may be a little harder to judge their development. But what about these guys that have been in the league a little bit longer, like SGA, Lou? I mean, I know Lou and Darius are still relatively young, second year guys. But what do you hope to see? What does Mark hope to see, a year from now out of these guys? What would be considered a positive year for your more veteran guys a year from now?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a great question. I don't think I could give you a specific answer right now, other than to say, we do want to make sure that we don't skip any steps in terms of their development as professionals. We want to make sure that, one of the things that we always want to do is when players move on from here, that they have some professional habits and there's certain expectations they have of themselves that are going to carry them through irrespective of where they go. I do think that even though we've had a lot of change, obviously people over a 10-year period of time, people are going to come, people are going to go. It's just the nature of sports. You've had people here longer than probably most. But I will say that I do feel like we've put an emphasis on trying to develop and grow professionals irrespective of their age. Poku is going to be maybe the youngest player in the NBA. I don't know that. It's kind of a reach maybe to say that, but I think he might be. But our expectations for him as a professional are going to be absolutely the same as that we have for George Hill or Mike Muscala. Now, having those guys is going to help us provide a roadmap of sorts, but I also think this is a real strength of Mark and some of the guys that he has worked with over the course of time, with the Blue and then also with the Thunder in terms of just instilling professional habits. The other thing with respect to those guys is resiliency. Having an optimistic mindset coming in to work every single day with a focus on improving, a focus on getting better, not just at the things that maybe garner the most attention, but in Shea's case, defensively, taking a big step defensively, I think is going to catapult him into another level of player. And I think he's got a tremendous amount of potential, enough potential for us to say, hey, like, we want you to have the ball. Like, we want you to be in this position. We want you to, and you're going to struggle a little bit with it because you haven't done it full time yet, but we're going to walk with you every step of the way. Same thing with Baze, same thing with Lou. Like, those guys are all going to have to fight and scratch and claw. And I think that's a good thing. I don't think Mark has anybody penciled in, into one position or another. The good thing is that we can play a lot of these guys at a lot of different places. Obviously other than Shea, we know, we kind of know how he factors into things. But I think that's the ability to show that, you can stick and that you can fight and you're competitive, and that you can improve and that you have what it takes to improve, because the wind's not always at your back all the time in this league. And, the people that last and the organizations that last and the teams that last have a resiliency to them, and they have a commitment to a central set of themes that they don't waver from when it's good or when it's bad.
Just a couple more for you here, Sam. We're going to kick it to Nick Gallo, OKCThunder.com. Go ahead, Nick.
Hey, Sam, just in your kind of discussion of opening up the runway for some of these guys, letting them expand their games, how do you kind of strike that balance, I guess, when you are evaluating, what they're able to do as they expand their games, in addition to kind of what their identities are as players up to this point, and what you maybe project them to be in the future?
Well, I think it's really, really actually a question for Mark. I mean, when I'm using the term, giving guys the opportunity to expand their games, and that's coming directly from the coach. I think just he has a vision for each player. I don't necessarily think when people hear that doesn't mean like roll the balls out, reckless, do whatever you want. I mean, it's expanding your game, through having some freedom to make decisions, but having an accountability to make good decisions with that freedom. And I think that, Mark, as I said earlier, has a good way about him in terms of building a trust with the guys and having a vision for each individual player, how they fit into the framework of what he's trying to do with the team, however. And so I think that is probably the best way to describe it. Mark will have an idea of what he expects from each guy, but he also think he's looking for where they can, not who they are today, but where they can be over time, and investing in them and giving the opportunity to them to prove that they have the freedom to expand their game. But I think that's coming down to the way he views development. And that's one of the reasons I think he's going to do an excellent job for us.
Thanks.
Last one here. We're going to go to Steve McGeehee with News 9. Go ahead, Steve.
Hey, Sam. How you doing?
Good. How are you, man?
Doing fine. I'm going to talk about one of the trades, or actually two trades that you made. You brought in TJ Leaf and Justin Jackson. These are two guys that were first-round picks, 2017. Maybe they didn't get the playing time they were hoping for. How can they help you out with the Thunder?
Well, first thing is, both guys that we followed for some time, we're probably going to get to learn a lot about them, obviously coming into camp and get a chance to see them play. I wish I could tell you that we've seen them a great deal. Recently we haven't, because obviously all the restrictions and everything. But like anybody else, coming in with us, the one thing we've never done, and I think to our benefit, is we've never judged people like on the way in. Like we've always let people declare themselves within our walls. And I think because of that approach, we've been able to, as I said before, see people for not, for who they can be and not just who they are on arrival. Like let them, like, how do they fit here? How can we help them grow? How can we invest in them? Do they fit? And we'll go through that process with both those guys, but obviously they are talented. I don't think they'd been selected in the spots that they were if they weren't. And as we've learned many a time over, like opportunity, fit, circumstance plays a huge role in people's developments. A player could really thrive here that maybe didn't in another situation. And that doesn't mean anything about the other situation other than it just might have been not been the right time on the timeline for that particular player. Sometimes people learn from situations they've been in and they approach a second situation differently. And that happens with our players a lot too, where, Jeremy Lamb is a great example of that. Like he didn't really get off the ground here. And as talented as we felt he was, he just never really got off the ground. But when he got to Charlotte, like things changed a little bit for him. And every one of these players is on a journey. And our job is to kind of partner with them and usher them through that journey within the framework of what we're trying to do as an organization, a community, and a team. And that doesn't mean they're going to be here forever, as we've learned. But while they're here, can we help them, help us reach our goals, and at the same time help them uncap their potential? And potentially maybe both those guys, this could be the right time and the right place for that to happen for them. We won't know until we get out there. We won't know until we get to know them a little better. But we're excited to work with both of them.